what we have to accomplish. Martin Luther King, many people dealt with from the moral-based ideals. We have a legal-based ideals here in being able to have the law behind us in many ways. Under the Treaty of Guadalupe, many of the constitutions in our country protect the rights and privileges of land heirs. So when you couple moral fiber of nonprofits and associations along with the legal right that each and every heir has under the Treaty of Guadalupe, is far more powerful than a moral issue with people fighting with for a nonprofit or for an issue. So we have a far stronger basis for moving forward than a lot of other entities or a lot of other issues that go on in our community. So I think this is a great venue because I think we have some differences of opinion on how we would approach things, but I think that's what makes this country great, right? Strategy, I think that's an option. That's always an option. Is it the first option or the last option? Should be determined by a group of people that are involved, educated, understand what's going on, and make an informed decision about the steps, because a misstep by any land grant could affect other land grants across the country by giving in, giving out, taking, or whatever. So we have to be very careful because of the lack of, I think, communication and education and information, basically having information to look at. So I look forward to the information presented today because I hope I can learn and be a better person at the end of the day, have a little more information, and be able to share some great ideas with some folks.
I just want to close with one thing. Arnulfo, this is Arnulfo's Bible. He's really a Bible man. He's really good at this stuff. But there's only one thing, one little scripture I want to share with you. And this is what drives me. When I read this, I said, wow, like God has written this for me. It's Ecclesiastes 9:10. I'm going to read it to you, and I want you to think about it. Whatever you do, do well. For when you go to the grave, there will be no work, or planning, or knowledge, or wisdom. Do this while we're still alive. Because as your ancestors passed, they can't do anything. It's up to us. Fight for them. They weren't educated. They couldn't speak English. They couldn't read or write English. My God, it's like me taking you to the Soviet Union, dropping you off and say, okay, go ahead and fight the fight over there for your land. They're vulnerable. They weren't vulnerable. They couldn't fight. But you can. And that's the difference. You know the language. You know the laws. They were totally vulnerable. They didn't have a chance, but they tried. I tell people today, when I go to these venues that we go all across Texas, I tell them all, when I go back to Illinois, if I fail, and the people ultimately make that decision, they'll either make this decision to do the right thing or to accept their fate and say, you know what, it's history. We can't do anything about it. Because if that happens, I can at least go home in Illinois, look in the mirror and say, you know what, at least I tried. And I tell everybody there, everywhere I go, can you do that? Can you say, at least I tried? Because that's what it comes down to. It's not about him or it's not about me. It's about all of us. We can't do it alone. And I certainly can't have 100,000 people, which is my dream, to have them at the Alamo, to bring this protest to a crescendo. I can't do it if I stand there alone.
Amen.
I can do and go to jail. Yeah, you're right. I can. That's probably what's going to happen. But if we do it together and we do it in masses, oh yeah, you're going to get their attention. Because you see, here's what the press is going to say. Hey, there was one guy out there, he's a wacko, he's about land grants. They arrested him, took him to jail. He was ranting and raving about Martin Luther King. That's not news. You know what news is? When people like you are standing there, hundreds of thousands of you, and you say, we demand justice. saying that you stole their property, their land. You see, politicians don't want to answer those questions. They like it when you do everything formally. They use terms like statute of limitations. They use cute little legal terms that keep you from getting justice. And you know what? As a people, you have a right to get justice. Thank God we have the Fifth Amendment. Thank God we got the 14th Amendment. That it says in there that you are a citizen and you will get due process. Thank God that this country is still great, but it has done wrong. You don't need to go far back in history to see the wrong that we've done. As a people, we're not perfect. As a people, we need to bring this issue and once and for all bring justice to not only the living, but the people who have died trying. But I thank you very much. And I'll let somebody else talk.
Yeah, due process is great if you can afford it.
Our congressional aides speaking for their reps, and we're going to talk about the land grant issue. We're going to talk about the land grant issue from New Mexico, from Texas, from Colorado, from California, all the Borderland states. So once again, on behalf of the Don't For Nothing That Talks Land Grant, the host and the co-hosts, Three School Land Grant with Jerome and his folks, and co-hosted by the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce, and co-hosted by the UN Land Grant Studies Department, and co-hosted by Two Countries, One Life from Texas. So on behalf of all our hosts and co-hosts, we want to welcome you. And at this time, I'd like to call Mr. Jerome Barrial to say some welcoming remarks.
Good morning, and thank you guys for traveling such a far distance. I was hoping to have made the Corpus Christi event, but as I mentioned earlier, I put it on my calendar. I work off my calendar. I work in the IT field, and so if it's not on my calendar, I'm not going to be there. Unfortunately, I put the reminder to be a day out, and I couldn't get a flight in time and a hotel to attend, but I was in discussions with them. And so I want to thank you for being here today and remind everybody that we have coffee and refreshments out in the area to the left of us here. So I wanted to, I think it's a great conversation. The differences of opinion is great, and the difference in discussion. So one of the things I wanted to make sure that I bring up here is that to make sure that we keep in front of us the idea of jurisdiction over the land grants that you guys have, the lands that you guys feel that you have legal responsibility for, obligation for, maybe have a legal right to, maybe your family does, maybe it's control by another family member. So control is another interesting paradigm. And then you have governance, the right to have jurisdiction over those areas, and then ownership. So one of the things to look at is one of the enlightening things that I looked at as a land grant was the trust relationship in a family when you have a parcel of land, and the responsibility for each of the family members to maintain the integrity of the trust relationship. And so you'll hear that the tribal reservations have trust lands, right, the trust lands. So why aren't land grant lands thought of as trust lands? Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. Everybody has a different opinion. Everybody I talk to has a different idea of what is what. So I think what we have to do is we have to make sure that we organize ourselves, come up with a standard taxonomy, a standard set of words to make sure that we talk the same language and agree on it. And make sure that we have the perspective to fight the fight. So I want to welcome everybody here today. Let me get the agenda. So we have So we really appreciate you guys traveling, and I look forward to some of the breakout sessions we have, so that we can sit down and talk. One of the breakout sessions I'll be having is land patents and water rights. The town of Francisco has gotten into a situation where we had to hire a water rights consultant to come in and help us understand the rights of each of the areas in our community. And I'm sure that Texas has the same situation going on with oil and mineral rights in your community. So, you want me to introduce the next speaker? So I saw Ed from the chamber. You're here to represent Alex in the speech, okay? So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to the one of the co-sponsors is the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce, Eddie C. DeBaca, and had the fortune to play with his son golf last Friday. He's a phenomenal young man, and we had a great time. So I want to introduce the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber, Eddie C. DeBaca.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Ernie C. DeBaca with the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber. The golf game was good for my son Robbie because he said you helped him with his swing, by the way. You helped him a lot. So, hey, just want to say hello, welcome you. The Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce, just to let you know a little bit about us. We are the largest chamber in New Mexico. We believe we're also the largest Hispanic chamber in the United States. For 2014, 2015, we were the #1 Hispanic chamber by the USHCC. But we have a convention and tourism department, and Yudi Morales, would you stand up, Yudi? Yudi works for me, and so we help bring conventions and tourists to Albuquerque, mostly Hispanic and Native American markets. We believe Albuquerque is a great place to come visit, and we believe when people come to Albuquerque to visit, they might want to stay, or they might want to bring their family later on for a vacation. So we really encourage people to come to Albuquerque and see our. I hope you all have a great conference here. How long is it for? Is it the day conference, or is it more?
Till Saturday.
Okay, so I hope you have a wonderful conference, and I hope if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. But I hope you have a great stay here in Albuquerque. Thank you.
One of my co-hosts, I was very proud to be able to get them to be our co-hosts with the UNM Land Grant Studies Department. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Ellen Garcia, and he will tell them a little bit more about you.
Buenos días de Dios. In Mexico, where I lived for about 11 years, people say buen día, buenos días, de Dios es mercado. It's part of Mexico became a revolutionary republic, and for reasons that we're all familiar with in terms of its history, Catholic Church tended to align itself with the wealthy and the large landowners in the state, and therefore, for a long time, the Mexican government made a fairly radical separation between church and state. But New Mexico is a little bit like Quebec relative to France. Just like Quebec was pre-revolutionary France, and the French spoken in Quebec, and the relationship with the church is different. New Mexico is also different in that respect from Mexico. Notwithstanding the fact that this was a territory of Mexico for a number of years, and of course, for several hundred years before that, part of the Spanish colony in northern New Spain. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm nursing a cold and I'm having trouble hearing myself. I'd like to welcome you today. I would appreciate it. I think I myself am going to have to leave shortly after this welcome because I teach 2 classes today. And so I only came here because Skid, the view, who I have a deep regard and respect for, and I really appreciate his invitation to participate in this conference and to co-sponsor it. That's why I'm here. Normally on a Thursday morning, I'm busy putting the finishing touches on that boring lecture. And I'm teaching, as it turns out, New Mexico history this semester. Actually, we'll be lecturing about American expansionism later today. You're welcome if you want to come. What the speakers have to say. I will be participating Saturday morning on a panel talking about the history of land grants. Let me just mention a couple of things about the land grant studies program that I direct, and also a little bit about the broader context of New Mexico land grants. I think you've heard already some comments about varying opinions on a variety of subjects, the fact that we have constitutional rights that have not been respected, about the fact that there's a treaty which is not being implemented properly, that nevertheless, that there's both a legal as well as a moral basis for many of the concerns that we have. My understanding is that we're also going to have, and how many of you here are from Texas? Okay. Welcome, Tejanos. I lived in Arlington, Texas for a number of years, taught at UT Arlington, and at first when I got there, my New Mexican friend said, "What did you do wrong? Why were you being punished?" Because if you know anything about New Mexico, the image of Texas is not necessarily the most positive. It has nothing to do with Tejanos. It has everything to do with Texicans, or Texicans, whichever way you want to look at it. But at any rate, I really got an affection for Texas and for the Tejano population, the Mexican American population in Texas when I was there. I directed the Center for Mexican American Studies there after Jose Gutierrez at UT Arlington, so that tells you a little bit about where I was coming from at the time. But let me mention a little bit about land grants in New Mexico as kind of a broader background. I think we've heard some of the, broader concerns, but I'll just mention very quickly if I have a couple of minutes to do that as part of my welcoming remarks. First, regarding the program that I direct, the UNM Land Grant Studies program was established in 2008 as a result of a legislative appropriation. It continues to operate at the University of New Mexico as a research and public service program. It's not an academic program, meaning we don't teach students. What we do is we reinforce what other departments, I'm also in the Chicano Studies department, for example, at UNM. So a lot of the students in Chicano Studies are in history or in community and regional planning at the law school, are involved in some of the activities and public service projects that we do. I hire student interns to place them in a variety of things. Jerome's daughter at one point was one of the interns that worked for our program and did some good work for our preschool. In fact, I think that was part of her sort of coming to terms and coming of age in terms of what her identity was with respect to that land grant. There are approximately 35, depending on how you define them, 35 to 40 community land grants in New Mexico today. Those community land grants are governed by a set of statutes under New Mexico law. Some of those statutes have not been amended significantly since 1907. So the legislation regarding land grants in New Mexico goes back to the territorial period before it even became a state. Some other legislation, particularly that pertaining to land grants as units of government or political subdivisions of the state, are actually have experienced significant revision and amendments in the last 10 years. The biggest change, I think, that occurred with land grants in the last 2 decades is that the interim committee on land grants was established as part of the New Mexico State Legislature with a charge of looking at legislation and legislative solutions to addressing the needs and concerns of community land grants. As a result of that, in 2004, most community land grants, not all for reasons that we could talk about on Saturday if you like, but most became units of government, meaning that they have exactly the same role or situation with respect to the state, well, not exactly, but similar to that of counties, cities, school boards, soil conservation districts, and so forth. It's kind of an irony that our land grants are political subdivisions of the state, because of course they were here before the state existed. But nevertheless, that status has meant a lot of really important progress for many community land grants in the state. Since then, we've had the beginnings of important state support for land grants, both financial and otherwise. The New Mexico State Constitution has what's called an anti-donation clause that prevents the state from providing any financial support to a private party. It can only do that to units of government. So at the time that land grants were viewed as quasi-municipal entities, notwithstanding their governmental status even before the state, it was a violation of the state constitution to do anything for them. And since then, they've been able to get things like state appropriations, been able to construct buildings, been able to build fences, been able to do a lot of things that provide community and economic development for their communities. I've done some research on Texas land grants. There's some significant differences. The first, of course, and the obvious one, is that your land grants were adjudicated during the time of the Texas Republic, and they were all adjudicated before 1845, is my understanding, unless somebody corrects me on that point. All the reading I've done suggests that's in fact the case. So the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo didn't apply to Texas in the same way that it applied to New Mexico. In the California and New Mexico cases, you had land grants that were adjudicated under surveyors general. There was a surveyor general appointed for California in 1849. There was a surveyor general appointed for New Mexico in 1854. In the case of New Mexico, the adjudication process took 50 years, from 1854 to 1904. Obviously, when you have a 50-year process for anything as complicated as that, documents are lost, witnesses die. There's all sorts of opportunities for shysters to create fraudulent documents. There's a lot of litigation. By at the beginning of the process, the pueblos, sometimes forgotten that the pueblos in New Mexico are Spanish land grants. Their property rights are entirely within the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Since the pueblos were not at war with the United States, like the Navajos and the Apaches, there is no reservation as a result of a treaty. The entire property rights of the pueblos in New Mexico, which there are 19 of them, are based on the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Those were the first ones adjudicated under the Surveyor General, and you had a few others, Mora, Santa Cruz de Mora. There were Chili's and others, a few other Spanish land grants, but most of them got delayed, and the longer it got delayed, the worse off it became for these land grants. I'm from one of those land grants that got one of the worst, not the worst off situation, but pretty much one of the worst. I'm from Cañón de Carmen. I serve on the Board of Trustees of the Cañón de Carmen land grant. I'm a past president of Cañón de Carmen land grant. Currently, I serve as the secretary. That land grant had, in its original petition, 46,000 acres. In the adjudication process after 1897, Cañón de Carmen land grant experience, we lost 95% of our land, and we ended up with only 2,000 acres of the 46,000. Other land grants were worse. La Petaca lost 99.5% of its land. San Joaquin de Rio de Chama is a similar situation, just horrible land loss. We'll talk more about that on Saturday, but I thought I'd give you that. My office, what it does is try to reconstruct the history of these land grants, try to identify all of the primary source documents, both in the Spanish archives in New Mexico, in the federal archives in DC and elsewhere, and try to get digitized copies of all of these transactions and then provide them to the land grants themselves, as well as to digitize, centralize a digitized record of all of these land grants so that we can help begin that. The other thing that my office has done is to create some maps of the historic boundaries of these land grants. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk about that some more. I know I've talked a long time, my apologies for going too long, but that is the background of my program, and it's an honor for me to be here today. It's a pleasure for me to see you, have a chance to talk to you and meet with you later in the course of the conference. Thank you very much.
One of our couples came all the way from Texas with their group, and I really want to thank the Texas people for coming, for making that long trip to be here with us for the next 3 days. And I can assure that you're going to hear a lot of information, and it's going to be good. I'd like for Elmer to come and say a few words on behalf of our co-host, Two Lives Country.
Es Anufo. Anufo.
Two countries, one life.
Okay. Steve, okay.
First of all, I'd like to thank Frank for having us here, and that Two Countries, One Line is an organization that was formed roughly about December 2014. And our main objective and goal is to educate the public of the injustice, not just what happened in Texas, but throughout the Spanish land grants of the Southwest. We've done a lot of research, we've gone to a lot of archives, we've been to Washington, D.C. But one thing I always find that we emphasize on everybody is to know who your family is, because what you find out is that each family has an interesting story. My 15th grade, he wrote the first history book in Texas. Juan Bautista Chapa, and he was a very interesting man. And if everybody just looked a little bit into their family history, they would find interesting stories about their own family. Where I'm getting with this is that getting your children involved, and that's one of our biggest things. My son Joshua, he's 13 right now. When we went to Washington to the National Archives, I asked for special permission if they don't allow children in there. I think it was you have to be 16 or older to go in there. But I asked for a special permission, and he's the youngest researcher allowed in the National Archives. He just can't go in without an ID. And believe me, we found some. He actually found some very interesting stuff that Joe's going to present later on. That's probably the key point in this whole thing, where it ties us all together. And I don't want to give away the story, but well, I think when Joe Seattle comes on, he'll present a lot better. All right. Thank you very much.
Elmer has been my main contact with the Texas people, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, Elmer. At this point, I'd like to call Mr. Martin Martinez, and Martin will lead us in prayer.
Here we go. Okay, that's it.
I thought you were going to speak.
Good morning. Please bow your heads. God of all creation, we come before you today to give you honor and praise. You are worthy of praise. You are the source of all that is good. You are the source of all of our blessings. Thank you for every gift that we have given. We thank you for the opportunity to come and gather together this day. We ask your hand of blessing on this meeting. We ask that you guide and direct our meeting so that it is full of wisdom, productivity, and respect for one another. Thank you for helping us to accomplish our work and our goals this day. Amen. Once again, my name is Marlo Martinez. I'm a small businessman from Española, New Mexico. Española, if you don't know where it's at, is located between or near Los Alamos and Santa Fe. For the out-of-staters, Española was founded in 1598. Don Juan de Oñate was the colonizer. He came from Zacatecas, Mexico. He was married to the daughter and great-granddaughter of Cortés and Montezuma. He asked permission from Spain to come and colonize and explore New Mexico, and he eventually colonized and brought Christianity and was the first founding father of New Mexico. The other oldest place before Espanola was San Agustin, Florida. So our Hispanics in northern New Mexico with Espanola go back to 1598, and we're proud of that. And it's something that we are proud of our heritage, our culture, our traditions, and we still celebrate the fiestas in July once a year. I was asked to speak here about social issues, unemployment, poverty, and the ills of the social things that happen in our area because of the loss of land grants. I'm arguing on the premise that if Hispanos in New Mexico, especially in northern New Mexico, had not lost their lands through theft and just about every other type of theft, from surveyors to gunfighters to governors, including the U.S. government, would there be less unemployment and poverty and social ills and alcohol and drug abuse? How is that statement proved? This is what you are all wanting to know. How can we blame all the problems that afflict us in northern New Mexico on the loss of land grants? In one word, resources. Another question, what is the U.S. Forest Service doing with all the land that used to belong to us? And could it have been used today to keep northern New Mexicans out of poverty? I'm a small businessman, and my father was a small businessman. My father was an 8th grade graduate, and he started the Espanola typewriter service in 1959 and has evolved into New Mexico Office Products, which I'm proud to say I'm still there for 38 years. And it's become more difficult as a small businessman because, internet has basically taken over. People can buy anything they want and get it delivered within 2 days, so it's really affected Main Street America. It's affected the economy of small businesses, so it's hard to survive and to do well enough in that situation. Along with the other social ills, like in my community, we have casinos. There's not that many towns in New Mexico. We have 2 casinos in the city, and then 2 others near the city. So those cause problems with people gambling and losing their money. And along with that, we have, like any other community, we have drug abuse. We have a high overdose rate and a high heroin problem because of pills, painkillers. It's generations of drug abuse, and a lot of it has to do again with painkillers being prescribed by doctors and a lot by the U.S. government. And the drug war has been a total, in my opinion, a total failure because they spend money and nothing ever changes. I don't know. It's like I heard the arguments a while ago with these 2 gentlemen talking about how to get the attention of the politicians, but they're more concerned about their own pocketbooks and like they said, it's the lobbyists. I was a lobbyist at one time. I worked for the state senate for 10 years and I was a lobbyist. However, I lobbied for municipalities and counties and those, I didn't do it for pharmaceuticals or any of those for big pay. And it's all about the money, everything's about the money, as you understand and has been explained to you today. So, in my own opinion, when you start looking at the land grants, and I'll go into, I think it was 10% that we were able to keep on land grants out of 10 or 11 million acres. So I'll continue with my talk here on that subject. To see a multitude of small businesses run by local Hispanos that would be directly linked to the resources of the land grants, they had not been lost, would have been great. All small businesses here in my county of Rio Ripa doing with their land grants what the Forest Service is doing Unemployment would be lower, poverty levels would have dropped here, social ills would have been significantly reduced as people would have had pride and a future in front of them. That's the opposite of what happened. The land grants were a large part. Take away the federal government, became the area of small business, and the cattle ranchers have seen how vindictive U.S. Forest Service managers can become. They reduce the number of permits, they increase the cost of the permits, and the cattle ranchers have to pay or get out of the business. What if the cattle rancher was part of the land grant? He would not pay to graze his own cattle and being a member of the land grant. He could have actually made money from the non-cattle source. Existing Mercedes or land grants are actually doing this business end of the land grants, but woefully too few. That's why we have the problems here in my county and the neighboring counties, because our potential businesses were taken away. We were left with essentially nothing. For example, SAIC, what does the U.S. Forest Service make money using the resources in the land? These are just a few. Selling millions and millions of board feet of lumber to industry as the Forest Service does. Selling mining and other mineral rights to industries like the Forest Service does. Selling permits to graze cattle and other permits like recreation, examples like ski areas and rafting and camping and fishing like the Forest Service does. Developing some of the land and leasing it to the developed for a variety of uses like the Forest Service does. Can anyone think of any other uses that the Forest Service is creating business out of land grants? Now, what would you do with New Mexico Hispanos with tens of millions of acres do with all the land and resources? The Hispanos of northern New Mexico would be doing exactly what the U.S. Forest Service is doing right now with their land grants. So you all know the story about the land grants and how they were taken away. And in my view, I'm an optimistic, but when I start looking at my country as it is, and because the large corporations, the multinational corporations have taken over the 750 families that are billionaires that control the media, they control the large corporations, they control the politicians. They've sold out, so I don't see a lot of hope. And if we're arguing about taking to the streets or doing it live, and the facts are there, then I can't see why it's taken all these decades or hundreds of years to be able to fight it in court and to win. I think it's all by plan that anything's going to change. If you look around the room today, Frank put a lot of effort into this and his board members and everybody else. And where are the people? Are they not interested, or what are they doing? They didn't want to take up our work. In my life, what I see, as a small businessman, I had the opportunity to study in Ecuador at the age of 15, so I learned the Spanish language, which was something that enabled me to move my life forward, to have a second language. I would encourage everyone to speak 2 languages. I arrived from Italy Tuesday. I spent 2 weeks in Italy, and it was magnificent. You saw the artwork and the churches, the beautiful churches. It's just amazing the amount of work that went into these places, and then you come home and start comparing what we have versus what they have. I was in Milan and Florence and Rome, and each one of those cities was like Las Vegas, Nevada. You had throngs of people in the streets, very vibrant, as a tourist destination, because that's almost all we have in New Mexico. Tourism and government. We don't have manufacturing. People don't plant anymore, it seems like. In the Tuscany Valley where we stay, they have vineyards, and they have a thriving business of produce and sales. And so it seems that we as a people have been lacking a lot of that. Sometimes you see immigrants coming from other countries. They come here because they're hungry. It's like a salesperson. I'm in sales. If you get a salesperson to go out and sell products, they have to be hungry to go out and make the money. If they're not hungry for it, there's no incentive, is there? So it seems like a lot of our people have taken it for granted, and they just don't. They're not like Vietnamese and come over here and thrive. When we talk about social ills, can we blame the land grants for the social ills? To some extent. Now, we have the opportunity to go to school. We have the opportunity to the internet now to see and to learn. My role models are not the politicians at all, or the sports figures. I have a friend that went into my store yesterday. He asked me for the St. Michael's medallion from the Vatican that was blessed. when on Facebook, I use Facebook to preach to the masses of what my bully pulpit, you know. And so the poor guy he has diabetes. He's only about 30, and he's on dialysis, and he has a good outlook in life. And he's a role model of mine. When I was in Italy, there's a boy from Chimayon near my community that enrolled in the school in Florence in art, and he stayed with us for a couple of nights, but he's missing home and he's missing his girlfriend, but he's over there doing something for his career. He's a role model of mine. And too many of our youth are looking at role models, at political figures. As we speak, the Pope is speaking in Congress today, or just finished, talking about moral issues and all of the greed and the climate changes. And the conservatives have a vested interest in, you know, again, looking back at the money, they don't want that. They don't want the immigrants. Immigrants are overrunning Europe right now, and people are just trying to, Greece itself is having a hard time. They're being overrun by immigrants, which is right across from Italy. So it's not happening on that side, but it's just the world is having a hard time right now. And the one world order is approaching, I think, to where corporations are shipping jobs overseas and hiding their, not paying their fair share of taxes, and it's falling on the middle class. The middle class can't sustain all of the taxes that are upon us, because the smaller classes or lower classes, they don't pay taxes. They're usually with the entitlements, and then the 1% is usually going around the taxes. Therefore, the country is falling in despair, and you see the money that's been spent in wars, in the trillions of dollars, and where has it gone, and who's stealing it? You know, so people are weary, people are apathetic, people have given up, and there's always just a few people that are here, that are fighters, that want to make a difference in our society. But it's not easy, because, you know, they say the man with the gold rules, and to some extent, I think I believe that, because money is overtaken all of our society, and in this capitalist society. All the rules are that people aren't being held accountable. People are getting, you know, I heard that the past president of Italy, now that I was there, he owns half the country. He's a billionaire. He was found fooling around with young girls and breaking the laws, and he's not going to serve jail time because they say he's too old. So there's no accountability to these people. When you start looking at politics and you start looking at the both major parties, I'm a Democrat, but they're beholden to special interests, and even if they have the best intentions, it's hard for them to make a difference over there, because they get caught up in the system, and the money clobbers them. So it's hard for them to really do anything. And if you look at the debates and the right and the left, the attention is not always focused on the best candidates. It's focused on whomever the powers to be are going to choose. So those are the problems that we're having in our country and in our communities. In my community, the economy is not so good. We don't have any type of, what saves us is Los Alamos National Laboratory in the state of New Mexico. If we didn't have those two entities to go and work there, we wouldn't have a community. And so we have some boarded up businesses, and near Taos, where Frank is from, you know, they're like a little Santa Fe, so they have a lot of tourism, and they've, but then the taxes are pricing the people out of their land. You know, they can't pay the taxes because they base it on what the next door neighbor's property sold for. So consequently, the Hispanos are being pushed out of their own properties because they can't afford it anymore. Same with Santa Fe. So what I'm saying is, we have to fight. Like this gentleman said, our generation that goes away, the young people, well, you know, they're caught up in their own gadgets, they're caught up in their cell phones, they're caught up in their games. So I don't know how we're going to get them involved and how we're going to change it. And I think the only way to get the attention is to have, like the Martin Luther King did what he did, and of course, you know, to the legal system, as this gentleman Jerome had said. But that might take 2,000 years, and I don't know if we have 2,000 years to spare. And it doesn't seem to be working, because everything's by design. I don't know if you've noticed. everything's by design, and our country is not, that video that was shown is exactly what's happening. Our interests are not being looked after. So, I want to say thank you, Mr. Frank Trujillo, for allowing me the honor to be here. And the out-of-staters for coming all the way to New Mexico. We welcome you here in our land of enchantment, especially in northern New Mexico, where it's beautiful this time of year. Come and see us. And if there's any other questions later on, I would be more than happy to answer them. Thank you very much. God bless you. The Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now this national anthem by Frank. I can sing, I just don't sound good.
We had invited quite a few of our elected officials, which we basically knew they couldn't attend or wouldn't attend because the land grant issue is like a bad word in New Mexico. But we're very lucky that 3 of them sent their reps, and we're going to hear from them now. And I'd like to call Nicolas Maestas to come and say a few words on behalf of Representative Duhan. Can our dignitaries representing our dignitaries please come up here? We had a lady from Senator Udall's office here. There you go. So we'd like for you to come up here and begin the festivities here. The festivities.
Well, good morning. We have a nice intimate group here. First, we'd like to thank the organizers for including the congressional delegation and providing us an opportunity to share a little bit of what we have done in supporting these very traditional, long-time communities here in New Mexico. My name is Michelle Hawkes Ortiz, and I work for United States Senator Tom Udall. In terms of time, how long would you like me to speak? Really? Okay. So, can you raise your hand if you're actually from New Mexico, just so I can get a sense for who is in the crowd and recognize? So, 4 people. And then, are you all from Texas? And what part of Texas are you from?
Dallas.
Corpus.
Miss Christie, wow. Well, thank you for coming to beautiful New Mexico and for joining us. We are so proud. I work for Senator Udall and have since, 1999, since about a month after he was sworn into the House of Representatives. And the thing that I learned about the senator, probably my first month in working for him, was his and his family's, the Udall's, the long legacy of work in the area of social justice that they had done. I read a book that Senator Udall referred me to that was written by his father, Stuart, and it was called To the Inland Empire. And the second edition of it, and you all should write that down. Anybody who's an introvert and reads a lot, this is a must read for you. The second edition was Majestic Journey, and Stuart wrote this. Stuart Udall was known for a lot of his environmental advocacy. It was under Stuart Udall's watch that he established the Land and Water Conservation Fund that basically pays to conserve public places, public spaces, parks, and that sort of thing. He worked under President Kennedy as his Interior Secretary. And he did a lot of work on saving the environment and advocating for Native Americans on RECA, the Radiation Exposure Compensation Act, the downwinders, that sort of work. But what people don't know, most people, and certainly me as a Latina, as a Hispanic, whose family goes back to the 1700s here, actually the 1600s, is the work that Stuart did on environmental justice and advocating for Hispanics. And it wasn't until I read Majestic Journey into the Inland Empire that I really gained an appreciation for the other story that's never told. If you read textbooks growing up in the public school system like I did, history starts in 1776, in the 1700s. What Stuart and other intellectuals have focused on are what they call the lost centuries. It's those centuries in this country that have not been incorporated into our story as America. And there's actually an essay into the Inland Empire called The Black Legend. And as I read it, I cried. And I don't have a copy of it. I learned of this conference and the invitation to speak 2 days ago, and I've been out of town. Otherwise, I would have brought a copy and allowed you all to see it. But The Black Legend is a really important essay, and it has made a huge impact on me and my life and how I see Hispanics in New Mexico, how my boss, it explained to me his sensitivity to the traditional communities here in New Mexico, his deep appreciation for the unique issues that we face and our colored and painful history. And the Black Legend tells an intellectual's account, an intellectual story based on factual history. These historians have gone in and have challenged the conventional wisdom that the Spaniards came in and tortured and pillaged and spread disease. It's a different account of our history. It's important for us to recognize that atrocities took place. But what we should be focusing on, and what the emphasis of the Black Legend essay is it was sort of an orchestrated campaign. It was propaganda. There was a reason for it. And for people who are well-read today to begin to challenge some of that history that has been passed on to us through ignorance. So I want to just sort of start off by saying, by way of background, that that's the orientation that Senator Udall comes into these issues with regard to advocating for New Mexico's traditional communities. I became involved in the land grant movement and working with the Land Grant Consejo and the Land Grant Council on the Senator's behalf about 3 years ago. And it's been an odyssey. It's been an incredible education, and strides have been made, not just while the congressional offices have increased our involvement. There was already a push by very progressive, enlightened leaders here in New Mexico, foremost people like Arturo Archuleta, people like Dr. Garcia Griego, and Juan Sanchez. These folks have, through their involvement in the Land Grant Council, have approached the federal government in a very positive and constructive way. There's a recognition, I think, by many of the stakeholders involved in talking about these issues and trying to address these issues, that mistakes have been made, that the federal government has not honored the commitments that it made under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. But a lot of that pain and a lot of that anger can be channeled in a positive way. And the strides that we've made working through the congressional delegation with the Land Grant Council and with the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. I can speak in great detail. I don't know if you have an hour, but we can talk about the cemetery issue, the San Joaquin del Rio de Chama cemetery and the return of the cemetery. We were able to hammer out a solution without introducing legislation. Yes, we did introduce a bill, but we also recognized that this legislative environment would not allow any legislation to move forward for the next few years, and these heirs would be stuck in a limbo, and that was unacceptable. And we challenged through a series of meetings that lasted over a year, and we were involved in every single one of those meetings. And those meetings were tense, and they were difficult, and there was frank discussion, and there was a lot of pain that came out of those meetings, and recognition on the part of the federal government that they had to do something to think outside the box, to take a new approach, to try something that they hadn't tried before, and it was way outside of their comfort level, because they were challenging their own policies. It was a fascinating example, but they came up with an administrative solution. They were able to return a cemetery to essentially carve it out of wilderness. Do you know how hard it is to take anything out of wilderness once wilderness has been designated? They were able to take that cemetery out of the wilderness boundary by really looking at the surveys and challenging some of what they had inherited within the agency. They had people out there over a dozen times measuring every last inch of that cemetery, and they concluded that the cemetery had no characteristics of wilderness. There was no reason for the federal government to want to keep in its sort of management wilderness. So they were able to carve it out. We all went up there together, and anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. It's a fascinating story. I believe that this gentleman back here is going to be, he's working on a documentary that chronicles some of the progress that's been made on the land grant front, and will do a much better job than I can in terms of presenting a condensed, accurate, powerful view of what happened. That's one of many accomplishments that's taken place in recent years. We've come a long way since the courtyard, the courthouse raid. The anger is important, and it's powerful, and it's important to have that kind of restlessness to really demand change, and to demand that the status quo needs to change and that improvements need to be made. But what the Land Grant Council, I guess if I can sum up my thought here, is in the last 5 to 7 years since the New Mexico Land Grant Council has come together and the Consejo has really gelled, we have seen progress, exponential progress in the area of land grants. I won't even get into the New Mexico Ossequias because that's a whole other issue, but very similar working together. There's similar efforts that are going on. So if you would like at a break to visit with any one of the congressional delegation staff, we would be happy to talk to you in more detail. But we are celebrating those steps that that are taking us forward. We absolutely, on our boss's behalf, recognize that so much more needs to be done. And it's, what is that saying? There's even a dicho about it. The largest journey begins with the first step, but it's poco a poco. What is it? What is it? Se anda lejos. I'm so embarrassed that I can't remember my dichos, but it's a good dicho. And so, on behalf of Senator Udall, we will continue to work and try to get it right for the people of New Mexico, because they deserve nothing less. And anyway, thank you for this time. Thank you for including us in this important gathering, in this important dialogue, and in this conference.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to introduce Nicholas Maestas from Congress Ben Ray Lujan's office. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you, Skip, for inviting us to participate in the event. And yesterday, I had talked to Skip a little bit. He had asked to prepare a few words about what the congressman has done or is working on in the office in the area of land grants. And so, thank you for the invitation for me to speak today, and to my colleagues for being here as well. And so, you know, I passed the idea on to the congressman and just let him know, hey, we're going to be at this event tomorrow, and so they've asked us to do a presentation and prepare a few remarks. And so he took up the opportunity, and he wrote a letter for me to read on his behalf today. And so I'll go ahead and read it because he could sum it up or say it much better than I can. Dear friends, thank you for inviting me to join you for this event, which has brought together some of the most educated minds in the area of land grants. I wish I could be with you in person today, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a few words with you about what I've been working on in our land grant communities in New Mexico. I want to thank you for all your hard work regarding these long-standing issues that are crucial to our culture and our communities. I'm excited to see that we're all here to learn more about our past, learn how to shape our future. I believe the theme of the conference, peace, unity, and friendship, is very appropriate. All of us here are united by our history, our background, and our pursuit of a peaceful, pragmatic resolution to these issues. In the 114th Congress, I'm working closely with all key stakeholders, including those within the Land Grant Council and the Land Grant Consejo, to finalize language, the Traditional Use Consultation Act, that will codify a comprehensive relationship between traditional use communities and federal land management agencies. Among other things, this legislation will require consultation with land grants, acequia bodies, by those who have been charged with managing our public lands in order to properly develop land management decisions. In the Traditional Use Consultation Act, I strive to make it clear that land grants and acequias are an invaluable part of our rural communities in New Mexico. This proposed legislation is one step in addressing a multitude of issues that impact land grants and acequias. There is much more that needs to be done, and I will continue working with local land grants and rural communities on restoring, preserving, and protecting our cultures and traditions directly connected to land use. Sincerely, Ben Ray Lujan. So again, thank you very much, Skip, for inviting us here, and I look forward to enjoying the panels and the lively discussion for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to introduce Alexandra Bressan from Michelle Lujan Grish's office, Congresswoman.
Hello, everyone. As you said, my name is Alex Bazan, and I'm with Congresswoman Michelle Lujan Grisham's office. I won't take too much time right now. Our New Mexico delegation is very fortunate in that we work very closely together, work very well together. So I'm really essentially just repeating what my colleagues said. But we're very happy to be here today. We're very happy to be a part of this dialogue with you all and to learn about your priorities and to see how we can advance those priorities in Congress. Of course, the members themselves are unfortunately not able to make it today. As you all know, the Pope made a more of a last-minute trip, I guess, to the United States and just addressed Congress. So they're out there, but I know that they'd love to be there here themselves. And I do want you to know that even though they're not here, all the things that you let us know, we take right to them. They have the utmost respect for our traditional communities in New Mexico, and I will be very interested in learning about the outcomes of this conference. So thank you so much for having us. Thank you for putting on this important event. Thank you.
Do we have any other elected officials or any other representatives from any offices from the federal delegation? So at this time, I would like to take an opportunity to, maybe if you have any questions for our delegation here, I'd be glad to start off with a question so we can maybe prompt the audience from asking. Do you guys mind if we take a look at questions from the audience? You know, I wanted to get the name of the book. I need to take those down writing. What's the name of the Black essay? Black something? Black Legend Essay. And I guess I'm kind of a harsh grader when it comes to what people do. And so one of the questions I would ask, if our federal delegation in the past has done such a great job, why are we in such a poor situation at this time? So my question is, if our past elected officials at the state level have done such a great job, and leaders are writing books and doing all that they've done, why are our trust lands within the land grants in such bad shape? And you know, it's great that we talk about the Consejo, and I'm a member of the Consejo. We've been a member of the Consejo, but sometimes we ask the wrong questions. The right question should ask is, why are there only 7 paid members in the Consejo versus 35? Why haven't we gotten much done at the federal level? Why do we have to relegate to state political subdivision status in order to try and beg for something constrained by state law? Why aren't we a federal political subdivision? I'm pretty harsh on the questions I ask, and I've met with some of you before on this. So the Consejo is a great organization. We have some members here. Dan does a great job there, and they have a great mission. They're great people. But you have to ask at the end of the day, what do they do? What value do they add to the rest of the community for the people that don't participate? And why are the others not participating and don't feel that they're obligated or need to participate? So I don't think the Consejo really represents at this time all of the land grants, being 7 out of 35. So I would just ask that and I ask those hard questions. I just got elected to that executive board, and I've asked those hard questions, and so we're going through that process now. Thank you.
I should take notes because there were many sort of facets and pieces that I heard in your questions and your comments, and I think it's a fair question with regard to advocacy and advocacy here in New Mexico. So first, I want to say, I forgot to mention that Senator Udall is the Senate lead on the traditional use bill, and this is unprecedented legislation. It's never been done before. And Congressman Ben Ray Lujan is carrying the bill in the House. It's under development, and Senator Udall is the lead in the Senate. So we will see how that moves forward. But it's the first time that we've done it, and a lot of time with first times, you stumble, fall, and then learn from it, and then regroup. So I'm sorry that I mentioned that, but I did want to plug that. So going to your question, and this is just from the perspective of a congressional staffer who has been sort of a fly on the wall, watching a lot of the developments here. There's an expression, and I'm going to get this one wrong too, but it's that local governments are the place where policy really gets tested. The federal government is a sluggish beast, and getting any legislation through Congress, especially in this legislative environment, is very, very difficult. They're talking again about a government shutdown this year. You all remember what happened a couple of years ago when the government literally shut down. When you have factions in Congress that are so disparate in their positions, what can happen is you just run into a brick wall. Keeping the government going is one thing, keeping programs funded is one thing, and when you're talking about passing legislation on behalf of these disenfranchised communities, that's another thing. So we are seeing an environment in Congress where very little is moving forward. On the other hand, what's happening that's fascinating here in New Mexico is the progress that is being made here in the state. The New Mexico State Legislature in the early 2000s passed legislation to form the New Mexico Land Grant Council. And when I first got involved, I was completely confused. I thought that the New Mexico Land Grant Council was the same thing as the New Mexico Land Grant Consejo. No, they're two different bodies. One of them is an entity and a body that was actually legislated through the New Mexico State Legislature, and that's the New Mexico Land Grant Council. And those members are appointed by the government, and it is administered by the state of New Mexico. And their job is to professionalize a lot of the land grants. They have to keep all of the board of directors in check. They have a registry that they maintain. There are very specific mandates that they are required to fulfill under the law. That's the New Mexico Land Grant Council. That's Juan Sanchez, Arturo Archuleta, Dr. Garcia Griego, and several other very committed members. And since I started 2 years ago for Senator Udall on this issue, I might have missed maybe 2 or 3 meetings, maybe more, but I mean, they meet every single month, and the congressional delegation staff and our bosses meet regularly with them. And they are doing an incredible job in terms of serving as a voice for land grants in New Mexico. People like Dr. Garcia Griego, when he educates the BLM and U.S. Forest Service about land grants, those federal representatives get it. They've done presentations to the federal government officials who are carrying out these policies. They've done sort of sensitivity training. They've talked about the history, and it's really fascinating to see the progress that they've made. The New Mexico Land Grant Consejo is the grassroots. It's more of the grassroots organization. These are not governor appointees. But again, this is at the state level, not at the federal level, but at the state level. And the Consejo is run by, I believe the director is Leonard Martinez, who also sits on the Land Grant Council, and he does an incredible job in just bringing the New Mexico land grants together on a regular basis to discuss issues, to talk about concerns, and to push for things like the traditional use legislation. And so these are two bodies in New Mexico that are, where progress is being made. And yes, you were right about the federal government and the lack of movement up until now. But what we are celebrating and focusing on is the progress being made, that we are getting on the right track, that we are moving forward on these issues that are so important to these people. So that's my best way of responding to your question.
Thank you very much. There was no just trying to discredit the organizations. My point was that there's not a high level of participation, and it could be for various reasons, and we need to look into that. And I sit on that same Consejo board. I'm on the executive committee. Our land grant has participated in it, and I think we need to challenge ourselves to add value so that all land grants benefit from the benefits of the Consejo and the New Mexico Land Grant Council, not just a select few. And I think that's what I get as I travel the state. The Trisco Land Grant has done a lot of work to help others' land grants as well. And I tend to be the one asking the tough questions usually. So those that know me know that I try to ask the right questions, not from a selfish perspective, but to get the right dialogue going. So if there's any questions from the audience, yes, sir.
Good question. Good question.
Yeah, answer the question, and then you can just repeat the question and then answer it.
We will get them to repeat the question, and then they'll answer it.
So the gentleman had actually mentioned the Congressional Black Caucus and asked if there was a Congressional Hispanic Caucus. The answer is yes. Actually, Congresswoman Michelle Lujan Grisham is the first vice chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. I don't know off the top of my head how many members the Congressional Hispanic Caucus has. Is the Representative Lujan a member as well? He was. Yes, he was our first vice chair last Congress. So our delegation is very active in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, in fact.
Great question. And we have other folks in Colorado, for example. My brother-in-law is on the finance committee for the Federal Hispanic Caucus. His name is Jose Rodriguez in Colorado. And one of the things that we need to make sure is that they know that there's a land grant issues on the table. And so I've tried to make it known when I've gone to Washington and met with different folks that
I put at the forefront of my conversations since the last 10 years I've been involved in land grants. So another question from the audience, back in the back left. Can you walk up and then we can hear you? I'm not sure we hear you way back there. I'm sure you have a good strong voice, but I'm sure you have a better question.
My name is Albert Manescas, and I'm wondering, since you brought up the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, what is their state position to do with land grants?
I asked that question. I don't think they have one. And I asked and he's a very active.
Which brings up another question, do they ever bring it up?
That's a better question.
Yes, it is.
Has it ever been brought up?
As I understand, thank you, Mr. Manestas, for your question. As I understand, confirmed with my colleagues, is that the Hispanic Caucus, the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, caucuses in general won't make a position on a piece of legislation that hasn't been introduced yet. So we hope to get some support around it whenever we do introduce our Traditional Use Consultation Act bill, but they don't traditionally take a position until the piece of legislation has been dropped.
When will we know what position they take?
After the legislation is dropped, I'm sure that they have resources on their website or those kinds that we can follow up on it and just see if see what's been posted that they whenever they have a vote when they go through their caucus steps to take a position on a piece of legislation. Okay.
Daniel, back.
I'm an ex-teacher, so you can all hear me. It was General Kearney who spoke at Las Vegas, Nevada, who said, "No onion in the field or blade of grass." What he meant by that was, you're going to keep your land, your language, your traditions, your culture. We believed him. That land, our language, which by the way is the official language of New Mexico, just like it is in Hawaii, we're a bilingual state, those are ours. It's not that we want it back, it's ours. The 90% of land that was taken from us, and our culture and traditions that was stolen from us because it wasn't taught in the schools when it should have always been, was stolen from us. So it's not a matter of why, but we're just saying we believe General Kearney when he stated this. That's all, just a comment.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah. Oh, Las Vegas, New Mexico, sorry.
Okay.
Interesting what was brought up here, and even more interesting is what the response was. You see, the only agenda that is being talked about in any legislative body, anywhere in this country, is the one that has money in it. You don't have money, what you have is votes, which sort of stifles them a little bit because you sort of get in the way. What's going on today with Donald Trump, people are waking up to a different country. They're starting to see a movement. They don't know what it is. It's kind of morphing. It's changing. But these people represent you. And a lot of times, they don't tell the story that you want to be told. This country needs to be more responsive to the people because we've gotten away. And yes, I respect all these people. They're all probably decent, good people. But money has taken over this country, as we all know. When people like Donald Trump can get up there and make outrageous statements and basically have the stage because they're billionaires, is that the qualifier for somebody that wants to be a leader in this country, that you gotta have a lot of money? Because I know one thing, I don't have any money. And if that's what leaders are, I don't want any part of it. But the problem we have today is even the good people that want to respond are being stifled not being allowed to set the agenda. The problem with us, to the questions that were laid out, we're fragmented. You go to Texas, California, everybody's talking the same things, but nobody's together. We're going to go this way. No, we're going to go that way. Great. Guess who's laughing at us? Yeah, you got it. The United States and Texas and California and the legislative bodies, they control these whole things. Listen, if things were going to be done in this country, they should have been done 100 years ago. It's not like, you know what, wait your turn. My God, 200 years and we're still squabbling about land that was stolen. And by the way, if you don't believe that, wait till my presentation comes up and you're going to see the truth of what was taken from your ancestors. But it's not an important agenda because there's other problems this country has right now. And you know what? You've been on the back burner long enough. That's how I feel. And these folks here today, they need to take that word back. Hey, something's going on here in New Mexico. And we think there's going to be a lot of people starting to catch on to what's going on here. Because that's what people like us, Frank Trujillo and myself and others, are trying to do. We're trying to create an awareness. We're trying to create another generation of people that know the history instead of allowing this thing to die slowly. If we can do that, then these people have a problem. Because you see, justice has a price. Justice is about money in the United States, and Texas, and California, and all the rest of the states. And the money, right now, that is being controlled by these poor legislative people, their heart is being heard. Their voices can shout loudly in their legislative bodies to get the justice for these people, for us, for our ancestors. But the reality of it is, there's a lot of powerful people that don't want things to change. They don't want you to get educated. They don't want you to tell your children the true history of this land grant issue. They like things just the way they are. And you know what? Unfortunately, they've gotten away with it for a long time. So I challenge these people to go back and do something. Because talk is cheap. Anybody can stand here. I don't even have an education, and I can sit here and talk all day long. But if nobody's going to follow me, what good is it? If nobody understands me, what good is it? If I can't inspire one of you to fight for what you think is right for you and your family, then what good is it? Thank you for your time.
I'm not sure if there was a question in there, but with the remarks that he's made, and I think that it's very clear that we're here because we want to take back this information to our bosses and let them know what's happening here. And if when we have a chance and we break or whatnot, I welcome you guys to come and chat with me and let me know if you have an issue that you want to make my boss aware of, and I will definitely take that message back to him. And so that's why we're here, and I know that you guys are here to be educated and learn about what's happened in the past, but how we can move forward from that and learn from it, so that we can take our next steps. You know, little steps forward or big steps forward. Journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. So I encourage you all to come and approach me, and I'm sure my colleagues would feel the same. And also through some of the comments related to the big industry and corporations funding and controlling candidates or controlling members, we've all signed on to campaign refinance. So we're wanting to get that out of politics and out of what our bosses are doing, so we can make sure to be here for the people. So thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Go ahead.
Has anyone researched or spoken with any of the Canadians, because they as well
has anyone here, or any of the panelists, interacted with the Canadian folks about some of the issues related to France? I don't know, but I could speak a little bit about the Hawaiian Act that I mentioned earlier. You guys familiar with the Hawaiian Act and what they did with Hawaii? They made a very specific act, and I would like to see a question for our congressional delegations here is, what can the delegation do to mirror what the state has done to create a political subdivision? I think we're political subdivision of the state, because if you look at jurisdiction, we predate the territories, and we predate the counties, we predate the state, we predate the cities, yet we're the bottom feeders, we're at the bottom of the rung. When we even become state entities, you talked about the Chapter 49 entity, I almost pulled out of it at the last legislative session, because it constrains us to state law. And then we have to refer to federal law in third person. And so it's not a fun thing to do, is to go to the legislature and then have to be restrained or constrained to state law when you know there's federal laws in place. So I wanted to take a minute. I found how many have seen the movie War Room? It's a new movie out. And Mr. Sierra mentioned some Bible verses, so I wanted to read this verse. It's Chronicles 7:14. Yeah, big separation of state and government here, right? But the town of Chusco has taken a position that we have both federal board and a state board under federal law. That federal board can operate without the constraints of the state. We also feel we can work without the constraints of the federal government, because not even Congress can change the Treaty of Guadalupe. So Article 6 of the U.S. Constitution states that they're to be protected and violated. So the Chronicles 7:14 says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sins and will heal their land. You know, I think as you have family members, we have members of our communities that have taken liberties to sell, give, control assets from within our grant. We have to heal ourselves from all the atrocities over the many, many, many years. And I found this interesting as I was watching the movie last night with my wife, it was a couple nights ago. But there's a movie called War Room. It's a great movie to watch. So my question, I'll go back to the question I was asking is, how can our New Mexico delegation, the majority of 5 that we have in the legislature, basically put the land grant rights into legislation so we get something analogous with the Chapter 49, but at the federal level?
So inherent in that question, you've conveyed a position, and the best way that I can respond is we have a certain number of bites at the apple, if you will. And it's really critical, it's important that when we take those bites at the apple, those are the initiatives that the community at large wants us to move forward on. It's critically important that the New Mexico land grant community come together in a coordinated manner, and that's what's happening right now, is you have these forums that represent the broader community. And what their value is that they present to the congressional delegation priorities. It's a wish list, if you will, saying these are the initiatives, these are the things at the federal level that are most important to our communities and our people and our children. And we are moving on those priorities that have been presented to us. The flip side is when you have land grants all over the state of New Mexico that have differing sets of priorities, or this priority differs from that priority, it is incredibly challenging to manage that legislatively. So the response would be, at least where Senator Udall is concerned, he will move forward on the initiatives that the New Mexico land grants are asking him to, based on priorities, based on what is most important to them. but it is nearly impossible for him to move on all of the requests that he gets from each individual land grant. We get bombarded with proposals, and these proposals take so many shapes and are of so many sizes. We have the whole spectrum, $10 billion trust fund. We are in a budget neutral Congress right now. So we are trying to take we're trying to take pieces of the larger ask and break it down into manageable legislation that are realistic and that are doable. Because the flip side is to work on a proposal that we know in 30 years is going to be still that. It's just an idea. And so the thing that is, the message, at least from our perspective, is there are so many land grants with so many different priorities. Please get involved in the Consejo. Please come to the New Mexico Land Grant Council meetings and present a legislative priority list that the congressional delegation can move forward on, so that we are moving forward on those proposals that the community at large has asked us to, because we can't do the flip. We can't act on the multitude of requests that come in, and the priorities. We need to do it in a manner that is realistic, that's actually going to make a difference. It's one thing to present legislation symbolically, and that can be done.
I would say that, and let's say here, because I like your conversation.
No, I mean,
So the
but
question you have to see to the question.
let me finish my thought though, please. It's one thing to present a bill, like the one that was presented, gosh, what was it, when Bill Redmond was in office? What happened to that bill? It was introduced and everyone got very excited about it, and it died. And that can be, pardon me?
That passed the legislature, that passed the Congress.
It
That
didn't.
didn't go to the Senate.
Yeah, it didn't pass the Congress, and we are in a congressional culture right now. Those folks who are actually following what's happening in Washington, there is an attitude, and it's particularly in the House. More is getting done in the Senate, but particularly in the House. Because of the membership in the House, there is a budget neutral attitude, so that anything that costs money, it doesn't even get a committee hearing. It just dies. And so an option would be to present legislation just to make people feel good.
So I guess the question, I guess a comment I would make is, I don't want legislation. I don't want the UDOLs. I don't want Heinrich to get in the middle of our business. Empower them like you empower communities, counties, and states to do their own business. Land grants need to operate in a governance structure that they are federally created. They sit above the territories, in my point earlier. So the congressmen need to listen that we want a power to do our own thing. We don't want to call the congressman, I want my burial cemetery back. We want the power innately to be able to govern our property and have structures in place and rules in place that say, when you overlap in territories that were appropriated under Congress when they did the treaty and they're promised those lands, the treaty under Article 6 takes precedence over an institution that was created like BLM after the fact. So if we put a framework in place that we can operate, we'll manage our own fight. I don't want to call UDOL and say, I want to get my property back. It's almost like getting in municipality, local government business. We sit far above that. We want to be able to control our own destiny, manage our own assets, manage our own dollars, manage our own destiny, and at the end of it. So right now, you're telling me to go to the Consejo meeting, which I participate in for the last 10 years. I participate, only to go and want to go support a bill to go get wood in Taos when I live in Atrisco, and you won't find trees in Atrisco. We don't have any trees. So it's not relative to us that we want to go get wood from Taos. So what I'm saying is, empower each community to protect their own assets, decide their own fates, and create their own rules, and not be subject to state law, but federal law, and put us at a governance level that has jurisdiction higher than the states. We're not relegated to state law. Since
when they created us, not even Congress could change the boundaries of a land pact. Congress can't change the Treaty of Guadalupe. It was a presidential signature that did a treaty. So there's a lot of things that the Congress can't change. And yet we have to go to Congress or to a representative who are a minority, don't have even a controlling majority in the body that they sit in front of to manage. Give us our own board of trustees in our community, empower us to get our money, the taxes in those communities, and let us manage our own domain. That's kind of what I see.
Yeah, and this is it's actually the first time that I've heard this vision and presented to the New Mexico Land Grant Council. I mean, have you made a presentation on this concept to them?
I don't know, talk to Daniel, he sits on it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I see Daniel at the meetings, but have you made a presentation? I mean, I think it might be worth, if this is the initiative that you want the delegation to follow up on, present it to this leadership body in your community and have them endorse it and have them present it to the delegation as part of the wish list. We are responding to the leadership councils of New Mexico in the best manner that we can, and we're trying to develop legislation, again, with their cooperation. They're actually looking through the language. And so we want that buy-in. We're not going to go after legislation and put, the full weight of Congress or the New Mexico delegation behind a proposal and not want it to pass. Because dropping legislation to make people feel good, that is one approach. And I know that a lot of politicians around the country do that. They do. It's done all the time. You drop a bill with the full knowledge that that bill is not going to move forward. And we are interested in getting things done.
Thank you. And it goes back to an original statement I made about asking the questions from a position of power. So when you ask for something from a position of weakness, you're going to get a weak position, and you may get something that's very small that you're asking for. Land grants are entitled to a large domain, and so if the leadership in the current situation that I participate in, I volunteer, I pay my dues, we participate in that function, but you are subject to sometimes thinking that's very focused on their own selfish interests. All I'm saying is that the government had taken, for example, like treaties and reservations, they treated them as trust lands, they treated them as wards of the state. A ward of the state started here back in 1848. They fared far better than we have. All I'm simply saying is that the federal government, our Congress people, elected officials, should take a look at that paradigm and do something to help improve the health and welfare of our community and regain the wealth that we should have control over. Whether I've made a presentation, they know how I feel. I'm not very shy. And so I will make my position known. I just took the time by just getting elected to the executive membership. So I'm now at the table at the executive membership to provide my feedback. But there's only 7 paying due members in the Consejo, and I've challenged us to say why that is. And there's 22 others, or what is that, 28 others that have opted not to. And I would just say that take the information they provide with a grain of salt, because there's 28 other land grants that have not provided that feedback, and you have to ask why. Okay. And I'm part of that 7 that pays, okay? So I'm challenging ourselves to be better.
I want to add a couple of things. The GAO report, the last one came out in 2004. GAO did some findings that we think are flat out wrong. However, that's what they took back to Congress. Congress gave us some options. Can this delegation answer to me if they've made any movement on those options? I know 4 of them. Okay, one of the options, well, before I go on, I wrote a book, and I challenged the GAO. It's called the Treaty of Hidalgo, and it's called Killing Hidalgo. And the reason I did that is because the only other person that has challenged the GAO findings is David Benavides, who's going to be here on Saturday and during those adjudications, which is pretty much a foregone conclusion. But the fact of the matter is, our our lands were stolen based on the errors and omissions of Congress and the courts, and of course, speculators and everybody else. The treaty has not changed since the date was signed in 1848, and it has not been respected whatsoever by the U.S. government. And these are some of the questions that we want to discuss that day and that we want to ask. And we're going to challenge the GEO report. The one question that I want to ask is, like I said before, Congress already acted, they sent their investigative arm, they gave their report, nothing was done. So where do we go from here? Do you want to?
Yeah, we would be in agreement with your analysis that there needs to be something done. We are equally concerned. That I think the question that you asked is the same question that we've been talking about, which is what is the, I'm sorry.
One question. Okay, Congress took this action on it. So they're pretty much done. And they're saying for us to go back. Which we want to go back on based on those options. Because I already took a petition to all your offices. And the reason that what I want to know is, all these actions have already been taken by Congress, by the GAO. Why cannot we get some of these lands back administratively? Why cannot we go just to the U.S. Attorney and to the Interior Department and have them work out some kind of an agreement? And because they admit, GAO admits we lost land, and they admit that we should get some of it back. So instead of having to hassle through the congressional process, which is going nowhere, to me, this would be one venue or one avenue that we can proceed with, is to do some of this, return some of these lands administratively.
It's, lands cannot be returned unless there's an act of Congress. It's like very similar to wilderness. In order to get any land sort of carved out, it requires an act of Congress, which is it's a tall lift and a heavy lift. Going back to what I said, the most supportive thing that the land grant community can do, and in light of the GAO report, because you brought up some really good points, is give us clear recommendations on, again, what those priorities are. It was my understanding, and I could be wrong, that the traditional use legislation was partly in response to this. I don't have all 5 options memorized, but one of the options is allowing those groups that have always owned that land to be able to use that land without going up against the federal government.
The only problem is that you have New Mexico doing this, Texas doing that. It's the United States obligation that they have to hold.
Right.
And so I don't think being a federal council like the state
So,
council has,
right.
and the head is charged with looking at this. And so why can't a simple recommendation to do that?
So this is what you all are presenting is a very specific recommendation, which we have not yet heard from the Land Grant Council. We are,
I talked to you all about this.
right, and we meet with groups, we meet with groups all the time. Again, we have a really, we believe, an important window and an important opportunity to do something that can make a difference. That's our hope. We are actually going after legislation that we think we can move forward. And so if you have pieces of that legislation that you want included, if you have these specific ideas, it is critically important to share those. This is a nice dialogue that we're having, but the appropriate mechanism to get that included in the legislation is working through the Land Grant Council, the Land Grant Consejo leadership.
That's not the only option. I think you're not hearing me, is that that's not the only vehicle. There's 28 other land grants who don't have that opportunity. So you keep returning to that point. I'm telling you that I'm part of that. There's 28 other land grants that come.
That day, all of it, to the treaty. are you folks gonna be here? We would like for you to be here because we want you to take what we discussed that day back to Congress. Okay, now I want to ask you another question. Okay. Congress did its decision, GAO did its investigation. No matter how.
And we're told, go to your state legislative person and then go to your consejo and do this. I'm just telling you, it sounds very, very bad to me. So he has a question here, so I'm gonna let him ask the question because we've been talking here in the panel. So I want to make sure that from the town of Atrisco, from a jurisdiction, control, ownership, and legal perspective, that our representatives understand that one day the 99% are going to wake up and hopefully get rid of the 1%. And so, go ahead and do your question.
My question is more of a concern that I would like for you to express to the people you work for. I think if you feel and hear the fervor and the anger that a lot of Hispanics have about their language, it's been put on the back burner has burned out. Nothing is going to be done.
We share that passion, we share that anger, we share that frustration.
I am not angry. I am being
We
loud.
share. Well, no, I was taking the comment that I heard here, and I'm simply reflecting back what I heard.
Anger is also a weak position, so I hope I don't present from a position of anger, because anger is positioning yourself as weakness, and hopefully I'm not presenting myself weak. I hope not.
No.
We're talking about a large amount of Hispanics who are very angry about the situation. Family members who have gotten older, died off, generation after generation after generation, and nothing is being done.
And I think when you say nothing is being done, that's the point that I'm focusing on. We can stay stuck in this sort of feeling of resignation that nothing is being done and nothing is ever going to be done. Because that's where our people have been for a long time. And where we are is we have an opportunity to actually do something at the federal level, and we want to get this right. We are equally frustrated.
And also, if you're sitting in the back, it's $100. If you're sitting in the front, it's free. So we want to get you guys engaged up here. Those in the back, can you move up? Especially if you ask questions, please come forward. Or else, okay?
You don't hear me when I speak.
Oh, I know you, Paul. How you doing? So,
Actually, my thing isn't a question, it's a statement. What needs to happen is that when something is done, people need to support it. You can't sit back on your laurels and expect for somebody else to push the envelope through. We all got to show up. And we got to show up strong, not angry. Strong, not angry. You hear me?
Amen, brother.
I agree with you. Thank you very much, Paul. Teresa? It is a question, answer, and comment period, I guess. We'll change it to question, answer, and comment editorials.
Definitely a combination of both. I just want to thank you all for the rich conversation. I come from the perspective of the familias and the community members, right, who have had a tremendous amount of social and human impact related to the years and years, right, of atrocities, right, suffering related to the death of the land. And so, although, right, at a high level, we definitely need to look at shifting and, right, restructuring. And I would actually say establishing, right, parallel structures for these institutions that have not served us or have actually served their purpose by design, right, to keep, right, our communities in a place of inferiority. I wanted to bring light to some issues that we're not talking about, and it speaks a little bit, I think, to my brother over here, that where are the people at? Okay, where are the people at today? Where are they at in the conversation altogether? We're talking about grassroots movement, we're talking about mobilizing. When you have a significant amount of our people who are incarcerated and who are not able to show up because they are simply unable to because of, again, the other social right and human impacts that have been placed on them, right, very unjustly. Right now, New Mexico stands, right, over 40% in comparison to the national average on incarceration. We We have a national issue of enslavement of brown and black folks, our indigenous peoples being incarcerated. Look at our native populations, right? Even now, we have about 60%, being that New Mexico, right, has about 3% of the population, highest populations of native people. Majority of them are in our urban communities, right? And they're completely displaced and disconnected to their resources and to their traditional ways of being. The majority of them are being incarcerated or they're homeless. And so my question is, we are spending over $300 million a year on incarceration. And that's not just folks who are in prisons and jails. I'm talking about community corrections, people who are on probation on a daily basis. Matter of fact, I would say, I don't want a show of hands, but how many people have been in the system in this room, or how many people, right, are in or have been a part of the system and do not get out and do not have access to affordable housing, to health care, and to food and shelter.
Legal services.
Legal services, exactly. So we right now are spending over $30,000 per person, and these are 2011 numbers, right? Over $30,000 per person to be incarcerated versus what? Somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000, approximately 7,000 for education for our young people. So I want to know. There's so many intersections. And we have to talk about all these other things, right, that are impeding, right, the progress of our community. So I want to know what you all are doing in your office at the strategic level, right, looking at budget development, looking at these intersections, right, as it relates to public safety, as it relates to incarceration, as it relates to economic and community development, because the folks are coming out and have not been properly rehabilitated, can't access behavioral health or primary health care services, and they cannot find a job. What are we doing to really focus on building up industries that really are asset-based, that are focused on our traditional ways, such as agriculture and water and land, right? It's all connected. How are we fueling resources, or how can we divert resources to really support those who need them the most? Because poverty is the issue. It's the major issue. And until we do that, we do not have an economic base because we overrated, we don't have self-pride, we lost our culture, we lost our identity, we lost our language, right? And so without an economic base, without a political base, without police and court system authority, and without a media, industry that actually the issues of the community, how will we ever get out of this hole that we're in right now? And so other issues that are very land rights.
Thank you, Teresa. One thing we want to do is maybe by name, Teresa is on the board of a town of a 3-school land grant. And Paul, I'm not sure if you're representing yourself or you're representing one of the land grants up north, but Paul has been a member in and out of the Consejo over many years, and we're hoping to involve more people in the land grant Consejo. I just got on the executive board, and we're going to make sure we have all the land grants coming to the meetings, no matter how difficult or how much disagreement we have, but we need to continue to talk. So we're going to get that question. It's a long question, and as you can see, our board is a challenging board. I deal with a lot of smart people and a lot of good people that ask a lot of tough questions. So our board is always bantering and challenging each other to be better. Somebody want to take that? And out of door number 3.
So one of the things, Teresa, that you had mentioned was supporting our producers. And as many of you know, the Congresswoman sits on the House Agriculture Committee and has had the opportunity to bring some of the priorities of our producers to Congress, as well as fight for initiatives like the socially disadvantaged and minority farm grants, farm-to-table initiatives, farmers markets initiatives, which not only, we can't just help our producers grow their food, we have to help our producers sell their food. Initiatives like that, trying to get USDA funding to help producers sell their food to the schools. So those have been in our office through the Agriculture Committee. Additionally, she sits on the Nutrition Subcommittee and has say, I guess, had the opportunity to directly comment on things like SNAP and other food assistance programs, which a lot of our communities really rely on, especially here in New Mexico, where 1 in 5 New Mexicans faces hunger, 1 in 3 New Mexican children faces hunger. So we are very aware of these issues. We're trying to make more grant opportunities available. We're trying to ensure that SNAP is still available to our citizens moving forward.
I actually have a question to that, because I am actually director of a nonprofit. We actually we sat together. So we have been doing traditional farming and agriculture for decades, and we actually were one of the original founders of Agricultural Network, which is now kind of put Albuquerque, New Mexico, Trisco back on the map in terms of reinvigorating agriculture. However, we have had to do every single thing alone with our resources. We do not have the infrastructure. So we need to talk about real infrastructure and real investments, right? And I mean, everything from filling out applications to become a vendor with Albuquerque Public Schools, to become a vendor with the youth detention facility, to, I mean, we're having to borrow a rotor tiller because we don't have investment. And so grants are beautiful and we write grants, but the resources are simply not enough. They're insufficient. And so what can we do to just really, really improve that altogether? Because we're not the only ones, and actually we're doing pretty well in comparison. We have one of the largest local farms in Frisco right now. We have 20 acres and we're growing food and feeding over 350 families a week. But we still don't have the infrastructure that we need. And we can't tap into it. Actually, Farm Service Agency just told me that we cannot access, and we know, right, I know many of you can probably speak to this, they told us that as a nonprofit, we cannot access, unless we're a for-profit industry, we cannot access a credit line or be able to get some of the infrastructure that we need.
So our office can always look into other opportunities for nonprofits, whether it be low interest loans, grants, things like that. And I'd be happy to talk to Molly over at FSA and see if they know of any other programs that they can point us in the direction to help you sort through that.
As a land grant, if you're not in debt with the state, you can actually, if you organize your board, you can actually go to the state of New Mexico and borrow from them at very low interest loans. Okay? But your board would have to do that.
As a political subdivision or without being
As a
political?
political
Okay,
subdivision,
I just wanted to
you're not in
qualify.
debt with the state. If you have zero debt with the state, you automatically have access to any loan that the state has available because you don't owe them any money. But you're part of the state because you're a political subdivision. So if you connect three things that you guys have just been talking about, you connect self-governance to self-sufficiency, and then that jurisdiction that you guys are talking about, who has the power to govern you? It's self-governance. That's why you're on the set. That's why you're a land grant.
Exactly. Well, I think, Paul, we mentioned that earlier before you got here, making sure that we try and have a paradigm or a framework of empowerment. I don't want to go and ask for a grant. I don't want to go and apply for this. The paradigm that we are in is that we have to come from a position of governance and self-determination and self-governance. I don't want to rely on a handout. I want our families to be self-sufficient. And so the whole thing is that we relegated ourselves currently because the federal government has relegated their rights and privileges to the states. And now the states have responsibility and they're remiss in their obligation. So both entities are remiss in their duties. So we have some great people here from our elected officials trying to help us. And there are some tough questions. We're not the enemy. We're trying to work together as a community to find out how can we survive as a community to protect our water and our land.
Well, see, if we have people here that are representing the elected officials, then they are well aware that their bosses signed an oath of office to support, defend, and promote and protect the Constitution of the United States of America. That's where the treaty comes in as very important. Go back to Article 6 of that Constitution and you'll understand what I'm talking about. But in that same thing, those people are where our monies that you're talking about, how we're going to become self-sufficient, because those people owe us a bunch of money for violating our rights. And through a lawsuit to gain punitive damages from those folks, we will be self-sufficient. And I guarantee you folks that.
So, Jerome, I just want to say, only working together are we going to be able to move forward. Only through coming together and working together in a constructive, positive way.
Working together is always a great option.
No, I mean, it's the only option. In this climate, at least at the federal level, I think...
You're telling me that the Congress is working together?
No, I'm saying the stakeholders.
Okay.
We need to really come together here in New Mexico to maximize New Mexico's chances of tapping into the federal resources. And we spend a lot of our time doing that. I wanted to just finish off on Alex's comments, that there's a new program, and you folks may not be aware of it. It's through the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the NRCS, and it's a pilot program, and New Mexico was given a lot of money for this program, and they're just piloting it to see how successful it is. But it bypasses a lot of the bureaucratic red tape. And land grants and acequias are allowed and encouraged to apply for this funding, and it's the Regional Community Partnership Program. And it's being administered through the water conservation districts. There's a gentleman out of Espanola. But if you want more information about that program, we'd be happy to give it to you. But the fact that the state of New Mexico designated land grants and acequias as subdivisions of government was a huge step, because they can now qualify for this federal funding and for the state funding.
So just a comment on that. The political subdivisions at state level is not such a great thing. It is a step in a right direction, but I would rather see us have political federal subdivision, political subdivision status than state.
There you go, federal districts.
One of the things that I want to bring up here is that the paradigm that we're dealing with, we just hired a water consultant, is that acequias are acequias because of the land grants. And so now they've placed acequias and land grants as political subdivisions at the same level. But the land grants also have a federal responsibility under the land patents, which they're the ones that hold the land patent. So as you can see, a state entity that's created has a weaker position than the federal entity that has a treaty of land patent. So I just want to make sure that you guys understand the jurisdiction and the layering of jurisdictions, that the acequias standing alone refer to the Treaty of Guadalupe, but they don't hold the right. The land grants hold the right in the paper for that right. So the argument that we use with the Attorney General, and I'll get to your question, the New Mexico Attorney General, which is a Democrat, Gary King at the time, they had made an opinion that the town of Chisco could not reconstitute as a land grant. And I argued with Gary that we own the line. And when you own a line, you own jurisdiction, you own egress and regress, and it's a powerful thing because Congress cannot change it. It's a land patent that was issued, and it's a federal document. And as I mentioned, we have applied as a TRISCO under the Treaty United Nations, and I am prepared through the end of my life, if we have to seek all remedies and all avenues for justice. And it may not occur from the United States. Paul.
Okay, so if you notice in New Mexico, we can't move forward. They can't develop economically. The main reason that they cannot develop economically is because when these big corporations get here, these big corporations have tax, not just one or two teams, tax of attorneys. These attorneys are sent there for one reason, to do due diligence and find out if the state actually has the authority to give them that property that they're going to place this corporation on. And when they find out that it's land grant land, they disappear. Why? Because there's a patent on that property and nobody can touch it, just like Jerome is saying.
Well, that's not really true. The British are coming with an Atrisco. We have Barclays, who's come under the mask of Western Albuquerque Land Holdings, who heavily lobbies with Vanessa Alared in Albuquerque. And so we're urbanly very heavily targeted in Albuquerque. Matter of fact, the Department of Transportation hasn't even been able to provide me with right-of-way documents for the town of Chisco. We have I-40 runs right through our property. I was at a county commission meeting recently and asked for right-of-way documents. Interestingly, their policy is we only go back 33 years to look at. Well, you're not going to find a patent 33 years ago. The patent was signed in 1905 and promised in 1848. So when you look at bureaucracy and you look at rules, my position will always be very anal. I'm an IT person. I'm not a political person. I didn't grow up with political science reasons. I read and I look at it and then I make an assessment, and it is what it is. And what I've deduced is that our political power that we are not using, both legally and morally, the legal part is strong. The moral part is going out and rallying the people. We need to figure out a way how to do that.
What you would do to find that evidence, you would go back into county records, because it was your county commissioners that easement for your state roads, all within all the counties of the state of New Mexico. They did that. And believe me, yes, they did. I've done all this stuff before. I actually worked with the Transportation Department for 2 years to help.
Well, then you can help us, because I called Nancy Perea at New Mexico Department of Transportation and still awaiting her friendly call.
She's not gonna call you back. Like I tell you, you have to go to Bernalillo County. They're the ones that passed the measure. And it's in their own minutes of their meetings that you will find that evidence. And they can't hide that after 33 years. That's established record. It's gotta be there forever and ever.
So Paul, we're gonna invite you to our next meeting.
I've been volunteering to come help at Trisco for what, 12 years now.
Oh, I know, but we have our own fight. We try and not bother other people if we can, and so we will. This is one topic on our agenda we'll put on there. I hate to make it about a Trisco, but we all have a similar fight. So the issue of information is everybody's challenge, right? I'm an IT person. I will volunteer and help you to do research. You call me, send me what you're looking for. I will help you. The only way we're going to succeed here is through working together. It works out, sometimes it doesn't. But if we can organize, I recently set a meeting for October at Total Wine. I'm going to go totally off character here. They let you use their building for free. You can invite 40 to 55 people for free. So I want to ask a raise of hands. If I were to have a meeting every month for land grants, but was televised or done over the internet through a ability to call in and have interchange through a computer, how many people would participate on a pretty regular basis, maybe a couple times a year? Would anybody here be willing to do that if I were to set up a meeting and then help other people promote meetings at other places around the country? Because we have to do this together. Because 5 congressmen in New Mexico do not make a majority. But I can tell you, if you elect your officials in a land grant and you have majority interest, they're going to protect the interests of your community. Counties do not have a majority interest typically in your land grants when you vote on something. Municipalities don't have controlling majority interest as well. State legislatures don't. So the only way you can really take controlling interest of a community is to either form a municipality or a land grant where all the members of that board represent your community interest, your specific community interest. And until we start thinking about working legal control, step up and want to take that leadership role, yeah, you may not like going to a meeting. Yeah, you may not like the people that go there. Yeah, you may not like what's said. Yeah, you may have a hard question come out, but bring it on, because I'm doing this for the 50-year vision for my grandkids. And if you're doing this because of you today, you're in the wrong room. We have to do this for tomorrow's century, for our kids. We need to survive. We've survived on this arid land in New Mexico, drier than dry, for 400 or 500 years, and we're a weed, and we're not going anywhere.
I don't have children, so I'll do it for your guys' children.
Well, that's what they say. When you do for others versus yourself, it's always a good gesture. So.
See, I have an input that goes just along with just what you're saying.
One more question. We're going to break for lunch, okay?
Okay. So the Native Americans have Native American calling, and it's a widespread program that goes throughout much of the country. Why don't Hispanic people have that? That would do a lot to get the word out about all these issues, not just land grants.
Well, I think every land grant's working independently, and I think as we start working more globally, I know Henry Tafoya, those that know him locally, he basically called me and said, I have Tom on his radio station. He calls me every time his power surge breaks and he wants a donation for his station. And I played sports years ago, and so I always give money to Henry. So I think that's something that we have talked about in Trisco, but it doesn't really help us that small. We really need to do a big global vision. We have to think big. Think big, and things will get better.
And that's where our elected officials can help us, because National Public Radio 89.1, which is the Hispanic music station here in Albuquerque, does not take questions about land grants, or will not even promote a land grant meeting such as this.
Yeah, well, Toby Atencio sits on that, right? He runs it, so he sits on our county commission planning board. He voted to support the pilfering and theft of lands within the town of Trisco for a big development out there. And I have a very public position on it that's been filed with the county. And so one of the things we have to think about is jurisdiction. So counties do not have sole jurisdiction. The federal government doesn't have sole jurisdiction. Most entities have mutual jurisdiction. So when you operate without talking to the other jurisdictional entities in a community, that's inappropriate, and the county, Bernalillo County has done that, and many counties across America do that on a daily basis. So I'll take one more question, I said it was our last one.
But when these counties, the state governments take federal funds to create programs within our communities, such as hospitals, such as railroads, such as airports, believe me, they're going to the federal government and telling them, we're gonna service the Atrisco land grant, we're gonna service the Anton Chico, we're gonna service the South Atrisco. They're heirs, we will service.
Yeah, they usually use our poor community to basically get the money, to move the money from the other side of the river, if you know what I'm talking about. So we're gonna break for lunch, with how long? Hour? Today? Okay, we're inviting the congressional delegation to attend a session with Mr. Miera later on tourism. And so we're gonna break for lunch now, and look under your seat. If you have number 5 under your seat, you're buying lunch. Just kidding. 4, okay. And there's the restaurants downtown. There's a place called Tucano's. It's kind of a Brazilian rendition place. There's a sushi place on Central, a couple blocks away. They have some food here. There's a place on Central called Pizza, New York Pizza.
From themselves. And many times as immigrants, you're made to feel inferior. I think that if we don't take this free speech issue on, it's going to come back to haunt us.
We have to insert the past to face the future.
There's a vast ignorance about the Mexican. And consequently, there's a myth that the Mexican is pliable, he is not resistant, and that anybody can do anything to him that anybody wishes. Well, this isn't true.
We need to change history. Otherwise, we're going to be here another century. We're all going to be gone, like going to be gone. So we have to work now. I want you to be understand. I want to apologize if I mention names. For example, know this. Not every American is affected by these memorandums. In our family, we have Germans, Polish, Chinese, and we love them all. We see them all the same. I have a note here of unity. Unity is a force. And if we're not united, the opposite party wants us to be divided. And lose force. He says, authority comes from above. Legitimacy comes from below. This explains why democracy cannot be legitimatized without an internal spiritual unity if all the people are not in agreement. Both of the principle of legitimacy and of the great moral and primordial principle of God. If that unity does not exist, the right of opposition becomes the battleground for a struggle to the death.
I'm going to stick around here. You guys go
You know,
out, take your family out to eat.
partly because we're young.
Joe and
Partly because
give me a sandwich
so
or
many are children of immigrants and having them
so I can take care of the stuff here.
Yeah.
So you need that third, you're talking that third generation is the breakthrough generation.
Maybe.
Like it was with Italians, for example.
Maybe that's what you. There is no national Latino leader. There are leaders of organizations who would like to be seen as national television, but they're not recognized. The commonality is around language. The power of language is very important to Latinos, both primarily symbolic. Also, language has been used to punish Latinos rather than color. Language in the Southwest was put in bad schools because they said, you're not smart because you can't take a test in English. And it doesn't matter that you don't speak Spanish, we're gonna tell you you're not smart because we're not gonna let you take the test in English. So language is a powerful symbol. There is an anti-discrimination associated with language, but not only language, that unites language, but not the way anti-discrimination unites blacks. Blacks have a common.
Yeah, I'm stopping it.
Los Latinos are not only some of the newest immigrants, it's some of the oldest residents of the country. South Texas, New Mexico, Southern Colorado, where Mexicans go back long before those territories became part of the United States. You remember the entire Southwest was